Echoes in the Pines by Brian Shinamiya. The frozen silence of the early morning was broken by a Jeep's tires crunched over the slush-slick gravel road, flinging little rooster tails of snow mud behind her. Sierra Willow drummed her fingers against the steering wheel, humming along just a split second behind the lyrics pouring through the speakers. I think that the truth is I'm scared. 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 Senses fail roared through the cab like a confession she didn't have to make to herself. She loved loud, fast-paced screamer music. Her boyfriend introduced her to bands like The Story of the Year and Senses Fail. The heater blasted her boots, while the vent on the left clicked rhythmically. The half-empty McDonald's bag on the passenger seat still smelled like syrup and hash brown grease, and her fingers were sticky from the orange juice she managed to spill on herself, trying to open it one-handedly. She grinned anyway, knowing the next song on the track was hers and her boyfriend's favorite, Until the Day I Die. She was on break for Christmas from school and due to graduate next year in 2013. She couldn't wait to finally be done with school. "Sorry, trees," she muttered with her mouth full, glancing out at the endless line of pine trunks blurring past. The road curved up ahead again, winding higher into the mountains, and her Jeep, affectionately nicknamed Basher for how often it lived into potholes, shuddered in protest. The road curved up ahead again, winding higher into the mountains, and her Jeep, affectionately nicknamed Basher for how often it limped into potholes, shuddered in protest. The sway of the vehicle nudged her left leg against the door, sending a dull ache through her thigh, where the nerves still refused to wake up. Sierra had been dreaming of this moment all summer. She loved winter and the outdoors. She took up mountain biking this summer. She pushed herself too hard on her last bike ride a month ago, and a slower than expected recovery, numbness down the outside of her leg, and a reminder that yes, she was immortal after all. But hey, she can still drive, still hike, still wander, but she learned the importance of stretching before and after intense physical activity. She tapped the brakes gently as she approached the turn, one hand adjusting the crumpled map wedged under the dashboard. I think that the truth is I'm scared. I think that the truth is I'm scared. I think that the truth is I'm scared of living. The line repeated again in the song, this time slower, more raw. It scraped at something inside of her she didn't have words for. She didn't believe in omens. She clicked her tongue and turned the music up louder. The sun filtered through the trees in long, icy beams, throwing patterns across the hood of the Jeep. A splash of mud half froze on the side of the mirror, and up ahead, another bend, another mile deeper into the forest where no GPS dared follow. She didn't tell her dad she took his tent. She loved it over. His was a black diamond First Light, and hers was some no-brand tent off eBay. She just left a note that said, "Gone camping. Don't freak out. I'm fine. Love S." Sierra leaned forward in her seat as she crested the next ridge, heart racing in the best possible way, that buzz of adventure tingling in her fingers. She wished her boyfriend could have joined her, but he was about 2 hours away in Belmont for their break from school. Suddenly her Jeep started to skid and her heart stopped as an icy chill washed over her. As she tried to regain control while the trees rapidly approached her Jeep, there was a clunk as the Jeep shocked and came to a stop. Sierra looked out of the passenger side door. Something was off, but she couldn't tell what. Trembling, she got out to see what happened. The crisp winter air caused a stinging sensation in her nose as she took in the smell of pine and damp leaves and dirt, the smell of the woods calming her nerves slightly. The Jeep was resting against a tree. A few feet away in the snow sat the wing mirror to her passenger side door. Right, Sierra huffed. Ice on the road. She laughed as she picked up the mirror, relieved her Jeep wasn't totaled. The sound of her screaming music flooded out the open door to her Jeep and echoed through the frozen woods. She didn't have much further to go. She winced and apologized to her car as the tree scratched the door as she drove off. The campsite was just around the next bend. Sierra came to a stop and got out of her Jeep. The yellow car stood out like a beacon in the snowy gray forest. She leaned her seat forward to get her backpack. She tossed her math book to the floor and tried to wiggle her cumbersome army surplus rucksack out of the back seat. She decided it was time to thaw out her dinner. She got her New York strip wrapped in foil out of the cooler and set it on the engine block. With a grunt, she hoisted the heavy bag onto the hood of her Jeep. The worn fabric brought a familiar comfort. Patches from all the places her parents had taken her were sewn onto it. Flag patches from Florida, Arizona, South Carolina, the Grand Canyon, and Kings Mountain. But the bag itself belonged to someone else's past. She bought the bag online, and it was used and abused before she got it. The fabric was covered with dirt stains. She had to sew a few holes and fix the plastic frame of the rucksack with Gorilla Glue and duct tape. She went back to her father's tent before heading over to the snow-covered field to set up camp. The snow crunched under her boots as she walked around looking for a flat spot to set her tent up. Finding the spot she was happy with, she set down a ground tarp and pulled the tent out of the storage bag. Sierra unfolded the tent poles and fed them into the tent, stretching it out as she did so. A few minutes later, she was looking at her tent nestled snugly on a small, clear patch of snowy ground amidst the snowy forest. Standing, Sierra's black diamond first light tent. Small patches of duct tape and a pool repair patch covered holes in the nylon. Its most striking feature was its vibrant, almost electric lime green fabric, covered with a few stains of a bold and cheerful splash of color against the muted winter landscape. This vivid green dominated the main body of the tent, while a contrasting band of durable deep black ran along its entire base, providing a sturdy visual foundation. Its shape was a classic dome tent, symmetrical and rounded, rising smoothly from its wide base, but it's always reminded her of a doghouse. She was glad that her dad kept it despite always complaining about how small it was for him. It was perfectly sized for her. Next on the setup list was her chair and firewood. She took her red and black chair out of its black carrying bag and set it in front of the stone circle. Sierra noticed she drove through the hoof tracks in the snow as she retrieved her cast iron Dutch oven and trivet from the back of her Jeep. It seems a family of deer had come through lately. Finally, she sighed. I'm almost all settled in. She smiled, looking at her Dutch oven covered in soot, sticky spots where she went too heavy with the coconut oil she seasoned it with. Sierra sat in her chair, taking the late morning. She was always amazed at how silent the outdoors could be, almost as if an ominous shadow was leaking in the distance. She listened to the soft crinkling of the ice in the trees and rustling of squirrels off in the distance. She pulled her fluffy black and white down jacket tightly around her and looked at her black leggings, wondering if she should have worn jeans as a chilly breeze blew through the forest. A wool Swiss Army blanket sat rolled up in the back seat of her Jeep, but she was too comfortable to get it. Sierra sighed. I really should get a fire going. She retrieved her Kephart-style knife from her rucksack before getting firewood from the back of her Jeep. Sierra rested a thin stick on the fender of her Jeep and tried to shave small curls on it without shaving them off the stick. She grunted as a small pile of wood shavings formed on the fender. Her father-made feather sticking looked so easy, and she couldn't do it. After several minutes of struggling, she managed to make 2 feather sticks for kindling and had set up a small pile around a cotton ball covered in Vaseline. She slid the spine of her knife along a ferro rod, showering sparks around her kindling. This was another skill her dad made look easy. She found herself hoping that her mom slipped a lighter into her bag. The air in the woods was biting, a dry, clean cold that carried the faint scent of frozen earth and lingering pine. The sun, slowly sinking behind the trees, cast long, skeletal shadows from the bare branches of the deciduous trees, painting the snow-dusted ground in soft gray. A frozen silence had fallen over the landscape, broken only by the occasional sigh of wind through the trees, as they gently squeaked, sometimes sounding like a door opening, and the gentle crackle of the small fire, Sierra had finally built. A sturdy, black cast-iron Dutch oven sat nestled amongst the glowing embers on its trivet, its heavy lid trapping the savory aromas of a New York strip, slowly cooking within. Wisps of fragrant steam escaped from beneath the lid, curling upwards and dissipating into the frigid air, carrying the promise of a warm and hearty meal. Sierra hates cooking, unless she could do it over an open fire. She couldn't explain why. Sierra, bundled in her black, white, and pink down jacket, knelt beside the fire, her breath misting in front of her face. In the fading light caught, she adjusted a few smoldering logs with a gloved hand. Her yellow Jeep Wrangler, splattered with the remnants of her journey, stood parked a short distance away, a reliable scintille against the encroaching twilight. The vibrant green dome of her black diamond tent, pitched between the trees, offered a promise of shelter for the long, cold night ahead. The forest around her was a study in winter starkness, the intricate network of branches etched against the softening sky. Patches of undisturbed snow lay like white blankets on the forest floor, reflecting the last vestiges of daylight. The quiet was profound, a deep stillness that amplified the small sounds of her activity, the gentle clinking of the Dutch oven, the soft hiss of the fire, the rustle of her clothing. It was a scene of quiet resilience, a solitary figure carving a moment of warmth and sustenance from the heart of the winter woods as another day drew to a close. The crackling fire warmed the front of her body while the cold winter air chilled her back, the smell of the smoke wailing in the air around her camp and the mouth-watering scent of the steak tickled her nose when she would lift the lid of the Dutch oven. As she began to eat, she glanced at her Jeep, the missing side view mirror in deep scratches down to the metal. Oh, Mom is going to kill me. She sighed as she bit into her half-burnt steak. The Jeep was hers, but her mom always scolds her for not paying attention behind the wheel. She took a sip of her hot chocolate and thought about living in the woods to avoid that interaction. After finishing her meal, she set the enamel plate to the side and watched the flames of her campfire as they danced and filled the crisp night air with a soft crackle and hiss as the moisture in the logs turned to steam. Sierra found herself reminiscing in the memories of winters long since past, visiting her grandparents, decorating for Christmas, all the fun things she did in elementary school. The memory of her first day of middle school crept into her mind, all the boring classes and friends she made. Sierra shook her head, wishing she could go back. Sure, middle school sucked, but it wasn't that bad. Slowly the smile on her face faded as an arctic chill emanated outwards from inside her. The joyful mood was slowly giving way to fear as the trees towered over her. She just had one more year left, and her free ride in life was over. She would be 18, and then out of high school. She shook her head as a cold sweat ran down her back beneath her skin. A year is a long time. Right? She chuckled into the night as the inky blackness of the forest seemed to get darker. I'll just go to college, for... She thought for a moment. God, what do I want to do after next year? She looked to the glowing coals in the center of her campfire. They were like a guiding light, but she had millions of paths ahead of her, and no idea which one to choose. Everyone at school was excited about college. She wanted to be creative, but she didn't think she had the talent for art. She liked writing, but every time she tried, it felt dumb and juvenile. She wasn't a science brain. Math gave her a tension headache. She wasn't anything enough. Not smart enough, not tough enough, not special enough. She didn't feel like she was failing. She felt like she hadn't even started yet. The plan. That was the problem. Sierra didn't have one. Jesus, what do I want to do? Sierra thought for a moment as fear gave way to panic. She had worked at a clothing store in the mall as a barista fry cook, but What did she really want to do? Um, uh, Sleep, yeah. Sleep. She chuckled, trying to force herself to stop thinking about life after easy mode was turned off. Sleep, that's exactly what I want to do. She headed to her tent. Sierra snuggled into her Nemo Disco sleeping bag that her boyfriend helped her buy. Life will sort itself out. Sierra found herself climbing the stairs onto a stage, wearing a cap and gown, her surroundings a blur. Slowly she walked across the stage, her heart thundering in her ears. As she took her diploma and continued walking, she looked down to see she was holding a paper, and big red letters were stamped, "Past due." She was swept as the sounds of crashing waves sounded through the air. Her arms and legs were bound as she was hoisted up, and she could see waves of paper crashing against the stage as she was thrown into the ocean of paper. As she sank like an anchor, she could see every piece of paper that whizzed past her, all marked: past due, overdraft, final notice, eviction, disappointment, regret, lost time. Sierra squealed and cried as she frantically squirmed and thrashed in her sleeping bag, struggling to find the zipper and gasping for air. Her heart was racing, tears welling up in her eyes as she finally found the zipper and struggled to pull it down. Come on, come on. She got out and struggled, trying not to cry and figure out why she was so scared. It was just a dream, but it felt real. Too real. She sat on her air mattress, knees to her chest, arms wrapped around her legs and chin on her knees. I'm not ready, she said in a trembling voice. How? She struggled to think. How do I get prepared? How do I prepare? After lighting a fire, she found herself pacing in the snow, a virtual winter wonderland, as she racked her brain. Okay, I'll just go to college, she huffed. That's what her teacher says to do and everyone else is doing. What am I going for? She yelled at herself, glad there was no one around. Her parents wanted her to try and get a job, but what kind of job? I know. I'll just do YouTube or... She stopped. Her gaming skills were trash and she didn't like video games, and she had about as much charisma as a pile of dung. Sierra collapsed into the snow. It melted under her, and a cold wetness coated her legs as she sat in the dim, flickering firelight, ready to just give up. She glanced at her tent, and for a brief moment it changed to a box next to a dumpster. Her palms pressed against the frozen earth under the snow. What if I pick wrong? She said to the frozen trees. What if I suck at it? She imagined sitting in a college lecture hall, surrounded by people who wanted to be there, who had direction, who had portfolios and internships lined up and ideas about quote-unquote networking. Meanwhile, she'd be in the back row, trying not to cry because she'd forgotten her login for the class portal again. Sierra couldn't even figure out how to properly feather a stick. And somehow, she's supposed to pick a major. She looked at her rucksack on the hood of her Jeep, barely visible in the flickering glow of the campfire. Patches from all the places her parents had taken her were sewed onto it. The Florida, Arizona State, South Carolina flags, patches from the Grand Canyon and Kings Mountain. They figured out how to afford a house, cars, trips, and then the guy who owned the backpack before her, he could figure out a plan for life. She envied that silent wisdom stitched into its seams. Her grandfather figured out how to get through life. He passed away a few years ago and left her $12,000 in gold coins and jewelry. Sierra was pissed when her mom and dad put all of it in a safe deposit box after letting her take one item from it. She took a gold bracelet and was now glad her parents kept everything away from her until she turns 21. She let out a shuddering sigh as she looked at her dad's tent and the army backpack, both patched up and held together with glue and duct tape. Maybe that's what everyone's life is held together with. Tape, glue, and prayers. One wrong move, no matter how slight the movement, it all falls apart. Sierra sat there as a fluffy snowflake gently fell on her head as the realization sank in. She's not special. She's not talented. And now she's on the threshold of entering the real world. She watched her mom and dad struggle through hardships, deal with despair, but somehow they could always seek out happy moments. Can I manage to do it? She drew in a deep, shaky breath as she sat on her knees as it snowed, confused and scared about what waited on the other side of graduation. I think the truth is I'm scared of living, she said in a shaky voice. I'm scared I'm gonna mess it all up. I'm scared I'm gonna amount to nothing. She could feel tears forming at the side of her eyes. It was always so painful facing the unknown. When she was little, well, it all seemed just exciting, fun. She couldn't wait to grow up. And now, it was everything but that. Her insides were spiraling, nodding, her vision expanding and blurring from the concoction of fear and adrenaline rushing through her body. The world started to spiral out of control as a tsunami of thoughts engulfed Sierra's mind. She felt so overwhelmed that she had to sit down. How hard could it be, really, picking an option that won't result in her entire life falling apart? I just don't want to be a failure. I don't want my life to suck. I want to make my parents proud, and I couldn't be further away from that. No plan, no motivation, just no drive, just lost. Sierra let her thoughts overtake her, as she had no energy to fend them off. It all seemed to be one giant mess. Maybe that's exactly what she needed to do. Go with the flow. Whatever happens, she will live on, glide on, hope for a better tomorrow, while taking a swing at random life opportunities. Something is bound to go her way, right?